Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we are happy to welcome you to the Cathedral of the Kaliningrad region. And first, we would like to give everyone a round of applause. In the solemn closing ceremony today, we are happy to welcome the doctor and professor. And the event is completely sold out. Doctor of biology, professor in biology, professor in psychology, the director of the Cognitive Institute of Cognitive Sciences of the St. Petersburg State University, Tatiana Vladimirovna Chernigovskaya. Welcome. Good afternoon. It's very careless of me to agree to perform here. First, it's Cathedral. Second, it's the grave place of Immanuel Kant, the best philosopher in the world. And it's not that I'm asking for some compliment, but it's really so. So, so let's start, because we have very short time, and so let's start. So I was thinking about what to talk to you, and as soon as it is not a very professional room, not very professional audience, I decided to start with this. Brain as Baroque. And in this picture, you can see Baroque things, Baroque items, those which are not shaped according to some rule, but which turn into masterpieces. And let's see how I can cope with it. Alfred Schnittke, in one of his interviews, mentioned something very important. You can read it in the slide, so I'm not going to read it. But his main idea was that if you want to create something new and unusual and especially precious, you have to make a mistake, or there must be some mistake. And, you know, he says it's like pearl, which is formed in the shell lying on the bed of the ocean. Only if a speck of sand gets inside, then it will form, it will develop. And he writes, the mistake or following the rule is the borderline or is the risk zone where some masterpieces can develop. If we have more time, I will tell you a little bit more what I think about this and what I know about this, because recently I have been very excited with reading some diaries, memoirs and diaries, or quotations of some people about some other people, and it's about some major scientists, some prominent scientists, not the people of art, but the people of science. And the people of science are not expected to say something like this, because science is algorithm, rules, regulations, and the more expensive your equipment is, the better your chances are to win. So, of course, but the discoveries are usually made only in the spheres where you can make a mistake. And due to this, I accidentally came across something that you can see here. And why I was attracted to this, it's because the phrase is very good. So try to witness different signs, try to notice different signs. And Pushkin meant try to pay attention to some details, some smaller signs, which sometimes are not relevant to what you are doing. And so let's do this. So, and recently, I'm very much into the topic that I invented for myself, is that the brain, according to what we know, and I would like Well, I know that there are philosophers in the room, but not only the philosophers. But according to what we know now, it is very clear that the brain is not something that acts linearly in a linear way, and not according to algorithm. Some parts of brain do that, but not everything. But our civilization achievements, something that our humanity is great about, is very much similar to the difference between Renaissance and Baroque. Baroque, as we know, changed the European art. Different stages of art, different ages of art. Fellini is Baroque. We will get to Fellini a little bit later, but Fellini is Baroque. Fellini changed the cinematography, and the idea what our brain can do through the cognitive prism, through the cognitive spectrum, everything that we can see in science, in art, in music, in poetry. Probably that's a new step that will be a breakthrough step, which will break through into some new sphere. You know that all the brain research is very expensive, but in spite of all the money that is spent on this research, unfortunately, we cannot make the breakthrough. So I know that, I have been working with the brain research very much and very long, and I know how much money is spent on that. We use very expensive equipment, and our tomographs are much more and more expensive, and there is an idea that we are moving the wrong direction. And sometimes my friends tell me, so it's not the time to be pessimistic. Of course, now we don't know it, but you know that technologies are developing, and then very soon you will get the tomograph or scanner that will show you everything that you have in the brain. We have got 86 billion of neurons in our brain, and we have a quadrillion of connections. And then I ask myself, why should I have this information about each and every neuron? I don't need it because I don't know what to do with it. And firstly, and secondly, I'm not interested in the activity of every neuron, but I'm interested in the activity of the whole neural network. And it's much more. So this sum, the total, is much more efficient than every single neuron. And such doubts and hesitations, so they did not start today or yesterday. But let's think about Pascal, whose works I read quite recently, and I was really wondering which progress they made. And you can see what he is writing here. I don't know anything about this world. I don't know anything about myself, who I am, what is that makes my feelings and emotions. And it's not just an ordinary person. It's not like a peasant. It's not somebody simple, but it's Pascal, and it's. Difficult to imagine that somebody in Renaissance time could come up with such a phrase. And as long ago as 1609, Francis Bacon, in one of his letters, wrote, "It seems to me that it's easier for me to talk to the ancient people than to my contemporaries." And just that's not an old-fashioned or obsolete statement, because it's easier for me to read Immanuel Kant or Schopenhauer or Pascal. Or somebody who lived long time ago. No, it's in 1620, one of his compositions was published, and this composition was called The Great Resurrection, or The Great Resurrection of Science. And at that very moment, this engraving also was published. That's the world which is located in the head of Joker. And so you can see, know thyself, And then there was, and in the center there is a solution of hellebore, so that is the herb which brings you to insanity. And so it is 1575, and think about it. It's the old date. And now when I'm joking that the whole world goes crazy, the whole world goes insane, so it's not a new thing. It has always been like this. And so they published the map, which I showed you, and there are some other inscriptions, like, oh, how much emptiness is there in the world, or everything is void in this world, and people are insane. Robert Burton, and you can see his ages, and in his work Anatomy of Melancholy, he wrote, the world is insane, the world is crazy, and it's the paradise for the morons. And so Shakespeare also referred to this, the same, that there is a lot of noise in the world, but there is no sense. And in 1620, Bacon simply said that the humankind is sick, and it has been sick for a long time. And this inability of a human to get the right view on the things is something that it's a kind of illness of the humankind. And he wrote some syllogism, and he said that if they did not take any urgent measures, then this illness or this sickness would become deadly for the humankind. So, but how can they teach, and how they can do something new? And then they started such talks like aphorisms, as they said that, but it is something that I call metaphorical thinking. So these are not ornamentations, and it's not for some entertainment, but these are
Другим типом мышления, они в самую глубь вонзают.
These are knives in words, which get inside your body, inside your flesh, and cut it in halves. So, and then if you don't understand that, then syllogisms will not help you. What is Baroque? What is Baroque? So you can read it. You can read the definition yourself, but there are different options and different definitions. So that's medieval term, which is called, or which is translated as intricate, uneven, not ordinary, not usual, with some deficiency. And that's what it looks like. You can see it. I have found some very beautiful pictures which can show you how beautiful it is. You can see these famous pearls, and they are all uneven with curves, and they are not regular. In this contemporary world, if it is round, it must be round. If it is square, it must be square. So that must be, pretty well made according to the forms. And you can see this, famous pearl, and it's absolutely uneven. So this pearl belonged to Elizabeth Taylor, but I don't know where it is now. The Medici's treasures, they are asymmetrical. They are not right, and they bring some anxiety. It's not because people cannot do something right. People cannot do something linear, but it's just the way as it was formed. And so that is another pearl of Lao Tzu. And why have I selected it? Because it looks like the human brain, and that is why I have chosen. And now these are electronic microscopic photos of what you can see inside the brain. Don't you think that it's very similar to what we have been discussing now? I'm not as stupid as the one who can bring some very direct parallels. But if you, if you look aside, so you will see that it's Baroque and not the first century. The science has been interested with brain. So brain is accepted as a very difficult, very complicated device, computer, which gets the information from the outside world and from eyes, but which are interpreted as windows to the outside world, from nose and all the openings in the brain, like windows, like eyes and nose and ears. So that's not my term, but so the scientists have been have developed it. So it gets the information from the outside, and the idea of computer metaphor has already become, or the metaphor has become trait. So, and I'm really sick and tired of it, because it's not exact and it's not precise, because it's just a small bit of that brain shows to us. And how do people speak about it? So I mentioned it. So the researchers collect the data, collect the facts. And they think that if we have the larger image of neuron, the better we can see it. So we collect all the particles, and then we will see the whole thing, the whole neuron. And probably those people who think this way, they were bad at philosophy, because if they read something serious, some papers, then they will know that the whole is much larger than the sum of particles or the sum of parts. Lotman gave a very good example. Of course, we can break a calf into some steaks, but unfortunately, we cannot make up the whole calf out of those steaks. So then, of course, if I have the information about each and every neuron out of 68 billion, so then, but I wouldn't get the whole, I wouldn't get the total, so it won't help me much.
Of course, we can say, let's not speak about simple neurons. That might be some zones which are responsible for auditory capabilities, for memory. So we have the zones in textbooks and in medicines. So if someone is hit with a brick on the Broca zone, then the person stops understanding speech or stops talking. But if we forget about medicine and start talking about how it works, then we must admit that there are no zones. There is a giant neuronal network. This is a network of networks of other networks and other networks of networks, etc., etc. And it gets beyond physiology. I'm going to say one thing which physiologists would blame me for knowing nothing, and physiologists would send me to take an exam in physiology. I have passed all the exams, but still I insist that the brain is not only physiology. If we are talking about these higher network levels, this is not about neurons. This is about mathematics. This is about mathematics which we don't know. I don't have an opportunity to talk about this now, but I've been participating in many seminars, including I had a seminar on that. So, and I asked a direct question. If we have mathematics which is capable of describing what the brain does, of course, I don't mean here some programs like Excel, Square, but the mathematics which is capable of describing these incredible clouds. And the general answer was no. I want to ask again, does the humankind have such mathematics? And the answer is no. Okay. But science is based upon this. If we don't have mathematics which is capable of describing this, so what shall we do then? Let this question stay in the air. We can't make direct experiments on human beings due to some ethics. That's why
Один из методов
one of the methods is working with animals. I believe, believing that they have almost the same as we have, but just a bit simpler. And we will get some information from animals, and then we translate it into human capability. So that's the question of level. That's not true.
которое даст результат.
Such approaches, these multiplications which will give some results, they are in vain because our brain is different. In this connection, I recall the Nobel physics laureate who has a wonderful article which is called Frogs and Birds in Mathematics and Physics. That's a brilliant article, and if you read that, you will understand that it's not about mathematics and physics, but that's about science in general. He says and writes that there are scientists who collect small facts. They are not interested in general perspective of looking from outside at the issue. And there are those who are not attracted by the facts, which of course are important. And these scientists are birds. They're flying high, unlike those frogs, which are the first. And these birds see big prospects. They see a lot. And they say, but some of them, I say about myself that I'm a frog, but most of my colleagues are birds, and I'm quite jealous of them, but it's not me. So what we are doing now, when I'm talking about 68 billion neurons, this is a look from, this is a frog's look. That's a good look. And a lot of Nobel Prizes have been won on that. But
По нему уже ходили.
this way, this road has been walked on. And the author says that those who follow Bacon, they're frogs, and those who follow Descartes, they're birds. And here we have some opposition between Bacon, Descartes, then Faraday, Darwin, and Rutherford. And then Freud, Cartesian dogmatism, Laplace, Poincaré, etc. These are important things. That's why I'm focusing on this, because people who work in these fields, they're not interested in that. Even they're told these things, they would say, so that's for general knowledge, that's quite okay, but for me personally, this is extra information which is not needed. Why do I need that? This is a kind of decoration. Serious science does not deal with these things, and they're very much mistaken. Why is a philosopher needed in this story? Because a philosopher is a person who can teach you to think in correctly, in a disciplined way. A philosopher is a person who should put the correct question. If I come up to a tomographer and ask it to show me where the spirit or the soul is in the brain, then the tomograph should answer me that I should do some housework and don't do science, because this is a stupid position. A question should be put in a way that it could be answered, and there is no training for that. In most people of scientific specialities. So, creation and art, it's something like that, which distinguishes our brain from other brains of our neighbors in the planet. Our brain is created in a way that, so it's not about being larger. It's larger. Nobody argues that. It's not about the fact that it's much more dense. There are a lot more neurons in the brain. That's true. It is a fact. But it's not about that. All those hyper network cognitomes, as as it's called by academician Anochen, all these all these tops of evolution, as we can see it now, this is not multiplication of units and rules, which we could find out studying or investigating mice, cats, or even crows, who have quite intellectual, quite high intellectual level. Christoph Koch says if we were able to finding out what the detailed differences are between the other animals, then it would be which opens the way to what consciousness is, who we are. These are existential questions. This is not a question of acquiring new knowledge, which, as you understand, is happening every day. So, this evening I will be in St. Petersburg, and I will turn my computer on, and there will be a lot of articles in the fields of my study. 55 articles here, there, etc. What shall I do with that? So these articles appear, and this information appears and appears. And in this case, we are not on the correct way. I suggest that we should look at the brain through a different prism, through the prism of art. Let's imagine that one day everything disappears. There is nothing. And after some time and some intelligent aliens come here and start looking at what our civilization created. Do you think they will be looking at our iPhones or some computers? No, they will be looking at Bach, Leonardo da Vinci. They will be looking at art, and they will be surprised. Who is the person who creates that, how his brain works when he's going along this way? That's why I suggest, but I don't know how. That's where I can't answer this question. That this is a good idea, but I don't know how to do that. So the brain is not a computer. If it is a computer, then it's not the one which we know. And it is art which shows us what a neuronal network is, which doesn't only process the information which comes to our brain, but this is a neuronal network which creates worlds. You may ask me, how do you know that the neuronal network of a cat, of a frog, does not create a world? And I can't answer this question, only saying that there is no evidence. But if I was opposing myself, then I would say, so let's wait until this evidence. But as for now, we have no solid ground to believe that other brain play with senses, with meanings, sorry. So if we are going along this way and take a stronger lens or microscope and try to see what is inside a neuron, and if we get very, very deep inside, so what kind of information will we gain if we ask these questions? No information, because we are not talking about the stronger devices to look at this. We are talking about the fact that we need a new paradigm. We are still on the same way. And who is the person who will find this road? Probably it is some of you. That's not a joke. I'm quite serious. So we need something different, because the humankind has been walking this way for quite long time, but hasn't achieved anything yet. Niels Bohr and Einstein spent a lot of time talking to each other, and I read about their talks and correspondence. For example, two physicists are talking not about what the world is and what we can say about the world. Okay, so then why are we talking about some devices? If we can say about this, then I would like to repeat again. We should go a different way forward. And what is real consists of the things which are not real. So that question puzzles me. What shall we do with this? And when I started working with all this, I was a bit frightened of one thing, that a quantum world is not somewhere there. So it is here in my finger. In the quantum world, there is no such thing as causality, because time goes into different directions. But it is right here in my finger. And then I ask a question. How does that happen? Are these two different physical worlds? Where is the border between them? Where is the point where the quantum world stops existing with its laws, and then another world starts being? I've been holding seminars on cognitive science in St. Petersburg for many years, and I invite there different specialists and experts. And several years ago, I had Roger Penrose, who weren't a Nobel laureate then. He's very much engaged with the problem of consciousness, and at that seminar, we discussed different topics for quite long at those seminars. Then we went to Moscow and we talked to him. And so, what is his idea? His idea is that consciousness are quantum leaps. What shall we do with all these leaps then? That's not a housewife between some meat and some cabbage. This is Ben Rose who says that. And the last phrase, which is quite interesting, Niels Bohr says to Einstein, no, you're not thinking, you're just speculating logically. So that's a blow. If poets or artists were talking about this, but it's one physicist tells to another physicist. And I'm getting back to what I started with. These are two different cognitive styles. And I give the example of Poirot and Miss Marple. If you remember these wonderful works of Agatha Christie, so Poirot is very logical. And Miss Marple works in a different way. That's what Anglo-Saxon, that's what in England, this is case law. She's knitting and then she says, okay, I remember that in our village there was a Mary, and I remember what she had a red hat, and I remember what she did. So she gets some information from her brain and she finds solution of the crime, just remembering that.
Lotman, whom I had a very lucky chance to communicate with very much. So he says that art is the possibility to take another road. You cannot live a lot of lives, but it's a second life. And we are used to taking the art as a kind of dessert. Because so I'm doing some serious things, and then I go to the Philharmonic to take some rest, and that's an absolutely different type of outlook. If we read Werflin, he has got a work which is titled Renaissance and Baroque. So he gives such a table, which I'm giving here, and what I write under the word Baroque. So that's what we can see now in the brain research. And it's not stable, it is flexible, it is moving, it is multidimensional, it is deep, it's not the surface, it is vague, it's unclear, and it's fuzzy, it's irrational, in the majority of it, it's irrational, and we do not understand what's going on there. It is vibrating, it's turbulent, and it's holographic. But we don't have time to discuss it or to discuss all that. Probably such an outlook, such a view on that probably that is our future road. But who knows that? And when we look at something, we touch the world, we tread on the world, and especially if it is some thinking. So the eye tests the object and then collects the whole picture. And what does it mean when it tests it? Some things are very dense, and some things are very deep. Some things are overlooked. Or probably there are some clots and something that is void. And art can answer the questions which haven't been set yet. So science doesn't live like this. And so we have very little time, but I would like to draw your attention to Velázquez's picture, Las Meninas. And you can see that there are lots of different mirrors over there, and well, everything is reflected in the mirrors. But who is the spectator, and who is the painter, and who is the participant? So this picture has been analyzed a lot, but it's really worth taking some attention. So there are nothing void in Baroque. Everything is filled, and that depends very much on who is looking at it and what is the context. Well, there is always some movement, and there is always some futility. And so it's a very new style, but I'm a conservative. Victoria Markova, who is a scientific researcher at the Pushkin's Museum, so and is my colleague, so talked to me about Baroque, and I read some articles of hers about Baroque. And she speaks about two manners. So when some genius is commissioned or was commissioned in those days, and she's one of the best experts in Italian art, when a genius was commissioned, let's say, for some church or for some cathedral. So he did all this work very carefully with all the details and all the right lines. But when the work was commissioned by a patron, so he did the work very carelessly. He could afford himself to break some rules. And it's really very interesting because when there are connoisseurs and novices, just I do it this way, not because I am a novice and I cannot do it right, but just because I'm ready to take some risk and I'm ready to experiment on something, and because it's just the experiment which opens something new to me. Fellini, so let's recall Fellini. What was he and what films did he make? So I remember one of his interviews when a journalist asked him about his film. So the journalist asked him, "Tell me, could you please tell me what your film is about?" And Fellini answered, "So just watch it, a novel or an essay or whatever you want." So, but my language is like this. My language is cinematography. And if you take Fellini's works like this, his movies like this, then you will understand what he wanted to say. Alberto Moravia, who is the best researcher of Fellini, called him this way. He said Federico Baroque. And the same traits can be found in Bergman, in Tarkovsky, in Alain René. So he doesn't depend on the context. He can be irrational, and he can be, so he is breaking the rules. No matter how paradoxical it can be, but if we take brain from a different viewpoint, from a different angle, then we will see the other spots, or these other spots can show us what to look for.
цветные штуки.
You can see these colored patches. So these are the connections which exist in the brain. And
Вилки, ложки.
well, we can found in any other minds, in any other brains, that there are some connections in some other brains, in the brains of other species. So it means that our brain works with meanings, works with content. So I mentioned it many times that some coincidences or some incidents happen to me. Well, very often books fall onto my head, and once, so I was hit by a book which was called The Reflex of Brain. And when it fell onto me, so it opened on the page accidentally, which told brain doesn't care, or so brain doesn't care, and brain doesn't connect to what it plans or what it planned for some past. And how did Sechenov know that? Because the book was written 100 years ago. And how did he know that the brain doesn't plan anything? So, and if I send a patient for fMRI, so then the scanning will show me that that brain doesn't plan something, but it hallucinates. It's like hallucination. So the brain can imagine. So what everything is that. But how did Sechenov know that? So there was nothing like this in his time, and he couldn't understand how the brain worked without any scanning, without any particular investigation. So, but we have got some networks. We have got networks which deal with imagination, and you can see in color green, you can see what networks they are in our brain. There are some networks which provide for the connection to the outside world, to the exterior world, and with the interior world. I'm pretty skeptical, but it means to some extent that if I see a network in the brain, it's not like reading of the thought. So I can see that the brain is very concentrated, and brain is very focused on some inner thought. There is a cognitive control network, and so it must be low to let creative thoughts come into the brain. So if you want something good to happen, then so you need cat to be walking on itself. Just let your brain go free. If it wants to be lazy, let it do so. If it wants to drink, let it do so. If it wants to swear, let it do so. So the brain has to function on itself, and we can even demonstrate it with some neuro tools or neuro methodology. Yes, allow your mind to roam free. Let your conscience and let your mind go wherever it wants. And it finds something. Of course, it does not mean that everyone will have some genius thoughts. So, of course, the cook, Mendeleev's cook, did not come up with the periodical table, but it was only the Mendeleev himself who came up with the periodical table in his dream. And when you are in the flow state, it's kind of vague or it's fuzzy. So that's a very important state, and much has been written about it. What does the art do? Just have a look at this picture. Impressionists, so they were much ahead the exact science, and they showed that they showed how the person sees complex visual images. We understand that the grass is green and the sky is blue only in the textbook. It depends on the sunlight, it depends on the sun rays, but we see it like this. We do not see very careful lines and very precise lines. And what if we fragment the world into geometrical shapes, or what if we make it like this? So, and this square, there are two interpretations of this square. The first interpretation is we reject the forms, we reject the shapes. And I have got another interpretation. I would say that it's all the shapes come together. All the shapes are squeezed in this particular shape. It's not the experiment on somebody who cannot draw or who cannot paint, but that's philosophy. That's very important. Just look at these microscopic photographs. Is it so? That's hippocampus. This bottom right picture, the hippocampus which deals with memory, and the road which I'm speaking about right now is very difficult, and its fMRI is not the only thing that you have to study, or EEG. You have to look at the draft papers, at the letters, something that was crossed out. So you have to study the pictures of great masters, not because they are more beautiful or they are more they are more perfect, but to understand how the artist was thinking and how they how they tested the world, how they experimented with the world, and what was the instrument for them to test the world. And they were doing it with their brain. Bacon, who I started with, is going to say our final words. He says, the truth is the daughter of time, not of authority. So, and that's right, because at some moment somebody is right and somebody is wrong, but everything could turn the opposite in some other times. So, but the thought is kept as long as we keep it. And here, the same as Mamardashvili said, that it's really a very difficult work to think. It requires the full concentration of the whole body. And why am I finishing my presentation with these words? Because I'm finishing it in this room. Probably thinking is our best existential work, and we are surrounded by so many live things, and we have to understand where our place is. And I'm very grateful to you for your attention, and I'm finishing my presentation with this wonderful picture, a masterpiece. And what is so great in this picture? Well, it's just a girl and it's just an earring, but why is it great? I don't know, but it is simply great. It is simply a masterpiece, and it means that not everything can be verbalized. When we say something with any language, and when we use the visual language, when we use the language of the mathematics or the language of plastic movements, plastic arts, so we also say something, and it doesn't mean that we cannot interpret from one to another. And I've got one of the people who I always communicate with is Anokhin, the professor of biology. He is always talking to me about the neural networks. And when I ask him what the point, the dot looks like, so he doesn't know what to say, because when you ask these direct questions, so it's rather difficult to give the direct answer. answers. I'm finishing because my flight, is gonna leave without me. So, but I remember another dialogue with Anokhin when we talked to each other and we asked ourselves immediately, simultaneously, and it was rather funny because we are I would say we are the last people who can ask such question. And we asked ourselves, what is brain? So, and it was a really funny situation because we asked it simultaneously and we asked the same question. And we answered, I don't know. And that was, again, the simultaneous answer on the both sides. And it was, again, funny because we, probably know the most about the brain, and we know the least about the brain. So thank you very much for your attention, and it has been a great pleasure of mine to be here.
Tatiana Vladimirovna, thank you very much. This applause are to you. That's a great pleasure to listen to you live. And I liked your slide. That it was not thank you for your attention, but for your understanding. You said alive. Now, that's quite funny. Once I was given a lecture in Moscow University, and while everyone was gathering, one boy took from the organizer's mic and said, It's such a pleasure to see you not digitalized. It was quite funny that he said not digitalized. So, and besides, let me congratulate you and on the International Olympiad on Philosophy. That's very beautiful. What formula will you use to describe this? Thank you very much. And I'd like to remind you that there is a plane. Thank you very much.